What if the very people sworn to protect us turned that power into a weapon? Ethan Hayes, a hard-working man with everything to lose, found himself at the center of a nightmare he never saw coming. But what one corrupt officer didn't know was that Ethan's family held a secret, a force that would expose the truth and turn the tables in a way no one could have predicted. Stay tuned, because this is a story of injustice, courage, and the fight for redemption that will leave you speechless. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale glow over the suburban streets as Ethan Hayes guided his aging sedan through the quiet neighborhood. The soft hum of the engine was the only sound in the stillness, a welcome reprieve after a grueling 12-hour shift at the auto shop. Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel, his mind wandering to the weekend ahead, a visit to his father, Judge Marcus Thorne, and maybe some downtime to recharge. The streets were lined with well-manicured lawns and sprawling homes, their grandeur a stark contrast to Ethan's modest apartment on the other side of town. He had driven this route countless times before, but tonight, an unease settled over him. He couldn't quite place it, but the air felt heavier, charged with an invisible tension. As he rounded a corner, red and blue lights exploded in his rearview mirror, piercing the darkness like a predator's gaze. The sharp wail of a siren followed, cutting through the silence and sending a jolt of adrenaline coursing through his veins. Ethan's chest tightened as he glanced at the dashboard. Speed steady, no warning lights. Confusion knitted his brow. Why was he being pulled over? Slowing to a stop, Ethan took a deep breath, his fingers fumbling to turn on the dome light. He had been taught early on how to navigate situations like this. Keep your hands visible, speak clearly, comply, survive. The cruiser's door creaked open, and the crunch of boots on gravel drew closer. A flashlight beam swept through the car, blinding Ethan momentarily before settling on his face. License and registration, a gruff voice demanded. Ethan squinted against the glare. The figure of the officer, tall, broad, imposing, emerged like a shadow. This was no routine stop. He could feel it in the way the officer lingered, his tone laced with an unspoken hostility. Ethan reached slowly for his wallet, his every movement calculated to avoid escalation. "Here you go, officer," he said, his voice calm but cautious. The officer took the documents without a word, his eyes narrowing as he examined them under the flashlight. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" he asked, his tone dripping with suspicion. Ethan stiffened. "Driving home," he replied, keeping his gaze steady. The officer, Officer Vincent Croft, lowered the documents, his lips curling into a thin smile. "Home? This doesn't look like your kind of neighborhood." The words landed like a slap, subtle yet unmistakable in their intent. Ethan clenched his jaw but said nothing, the years of warnings from his father echoing in his mind. "Don't give them a reason. Step out of the vehicle," Officer Croft ordered suddenly. Ethan hesitated, his pulse quickening. "Is there a problem, officer?" "Step out of the vehicle," Officer Croft repeated, his hand moving to rest on the baton at his hip. Exhaling slowly, Ethan unbuckled his seat belt and opened the door, stepping into the cool night air. He stood by the hood of his car, his hands raised slightly in a gesture of compliance. Officer Croft circled him like a predator sizing up its prey, his flashlight flicking from Ethan's face to the car. "I'm going to search the vehicle," Officer Croft announced, not waiting for permission. "Am I being detained?" Ethan asked, his voice steady but firm. "Keep your mouth shut and stay right there," Officer Croft snapped. Ethan watched as Officer Croft began rummaging through the glove compartment, the center console, under the seats. The officer's movements were hurried, almost frantic, like a man searching for something he already knew was there. A knot of dread coiled in Ethan's stomach, tightening with each passing second. "Found something," Officer Croft declared suddenly, holding up a small plastic bag filled with a white powder. His tone was triumphant, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "What?" Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "That's not mine. I don't even drink, let alone save it," Officer Croft interrupted, snapping a pair of handcuffs onto Ethan's wrist. The cold metal bit into his skin, a cruel reminder of his vulnerability. Ethan felt the ground tilt beneath him, his world spinning out of control. He tried to speak, to protest, but the words caught in his throat as Officer Croft shoved him into the back seat of the cruiser. The reality of the situation crashed down on him. His voice finally broke through the haze. "This is a mistake," Ethan shouted, his desperation filling the confined space. "You're making a mistake." But Officer Croft didn't respond. He simply got into the driver's seat, his smirk hidden in the shadows, and drove off into the night. Inside the cruiser, Ethan's thoughts raced. He replayed the events in his mind, searching for answers that eluded him. The officer's smirk, the planted drugs, it was all so calculated, so deliberate. His father's words rang in his ears again, louder this time. "Stay calm, stay smart." As the precinct loomed in the distance, Ethan clung to a single thread of hope. His father would know what to do. Judge Marcus Thorne wasn't just a man of the law. He was a man of unwavering principles. And if anyone could help him find justice in this nightmare, it was him. What Ethan didn't realize, however, was that this was only the beginning. Officer Vincent Croft had set a fire he couldn't contain, and the flames were about to consume everything in their path. The fluorescent lights of the precinct buzzed faintly, casting an unforgiving glare over the stark gray walls. Ethan Hayes sat on a cold metal bench, his wrists still cuffed behind his back. His pulse thudded in his ears, his breath shallow as he tried to steady himself. The events of the past hour felt surreal, like a waking nightmare he couldn't escape. Through the bars of the holding cell, Ethan could see Officer Vincent Croft seated at his desk, typing up his report with a calm efficiency that bordered on smugness. Officer Croft's fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, as if crafting the story were second nature to him. He glanced up briefly, locking eyes with Ethan, a faint smirk playing on his lips before returning to his work. Suspect was driving erratically. Officer Croft muttered aloud as he typed, his voice dripping with false authority. During the search, narcotics were discovered in plain view under the driver's seat. Suspect resisted arrest, requiring the use of handcuffs to subdue him. The words were clinical, detached, but every sentence was a lie, a fabrication designed to secure an easy win for Officer Croft's arrest record. To him, Ethan wasn't a person. He was a statistic, another mark on a list that would bolster Officer Croft's reputation. Across the room, Officer Samuel Rios watched silently, his brows furrowed in unease. He had partnered with Officer Croft for 2 years, enough time to recognize his senior officer's pattern of targeting vulnerable individuals. But this time felt different, more blatant, more brazen. Samuel glanced at Ethan, his conscience gnawing at him. "Croft," Samuel called, his voice hesitant. "Are you sure about this guy? He doesn't seem like..." "Like what?" Officer Croft cut him off, his tone sharp. "A criminal, Rios. It's not our job to judge. We enforce the law." Samuel wanted to push back, but Officer Croft's reputation for retaliation silenced him. He nodded weakly and returned to his desk, though the knot in his stomach tightened. An officer opened the cell door briefly, allowing Ethan his one phone call. The cuffs were removed, leaving angry red marks on his wrists. Ethan flexed his hands to ease the sting before stepping toward the phone mounted on the wall. The receiver felt heavy in his hand as he dialed the number he had memorized since childhood. Each ring felt like an eternity, but finally, the familiar, deep voice of his father answered. "Hello." Judge Marcus Thorne's voice was steady, calm, a voice that had reassured countless people in times of crisis. "Dad," Ethan said, his voice trembling despite his best efforts. "I'm at the precinct. They've arrested me." There was a pause on the line, the weight of Judge Thorne's silence pressing down on Ethan. "Are you hurt?" Judge Thorne asked, his tone measured but with an edge of controlled anger. "No, I'm fine," Ethan replied quickly. "But they're saying I had drugs in my car." "Dad, it's not true, I swear." "He planted it. The officer planted it." Judge Thorne's voice was firm, unshakable. "Listen to me, Ethan. Say nothing to anyone else. I'll handle this. Do you understand?" "Yes," Ethan said, his throat tightening. "Please hurry." The call ended, leaving Ethan with a flicker of hope. He knew his father wasn't just a judge. He was a man who had spent his career fighting for justice, a man who believed in truth and fairness above all else. If anyone could help him, it was Judge Thorne. It didn't take long for Judge Marcus Thorne to arrive at the precinct, dressed in a crisp suit and carrying an air of authority. He entered the station like a storm, his piercing gaze sweeping over the room. Behind him was Eleanor Vance, a formidable attorney known for her relentless pursuit of justice. "Where's my son?" Judge Thorne demanded, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the officers. Officer Croft stood from his desk, his smirk faltering as he approached. "Judge Thorne," he began, attempting to sound respectful. "Your son was found with narcotics in his vehicle. The evidence is solid." Judge Thorne's eyes narrowed, his calm exterior barely concealing the storm brewing beneath. Evidence. Let me see it. Officer Croft hesitated, glancing at his captain, but Judge Thorne's unrelenting stare forced his compliance. He motioned toward the evidence locker, where a small plastic bag sat sealed and labeled. Judge Thorne inspected the bag closely, his trained eyes noting the inconsistencies. No identifying markers, no chain of custody. His jaw tightened. Turning to Eleanor, he said, "We need a full review of this case. Every detail, every report." Eleanor nodded, her expression as sharp as steel. Already on it. As Judge Thorne and Eleanor began their work, Officer Croft retreated to the break room, his confidence shaken. He hadn't expected Judge Thorne to be involved, and the weight of his actions was beginning to press on him. Still, his arrogance refused to let him back down. Meanwhile, Eleanor's review of Officer Croft's arrest report revealed glaring holes. No body cam footage, no justification for the search, and no signs of resistance from Ethan. She requested surveillance footage from a nearby store, hoping to find something that would expose the truth. As the night wore on, Officer Croft realized he had targeted the wrong man, but it was too late to undo what he had set in motion. The walls were closing in, and for the first time, Officer Croft felt the creeping chill of fear. The precinct buzzed with subdued tension as Eleanor Vance pored over the arrest report, her sharp eyes scanning every line. The inconsistencies were glaring. No probable cause for the traffic stop, no detailed documentation of the search, and the absence of body cam footage. It was a house of cards waiting to collapse. Across from her, Judge Marcus Thorne sat with his arms crossed, his expression a mask of controlled anger. He didn't even try to cover his tracks. Eleanor muttered, shaking her head. "This isn't just misconduct, it's outright corruption." Judge Thorne leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "We need more than suspicion. We need proof, something irrefutable." As if on cue, the door opened, and Officer Samuel Rios stepped in, his face pale but resolute. He hesitated at the threshold, his gaze flickering between Eleanor and Judge Thorne before settling on the judge. "Judge Thorne," Samuel began, his voice tight. "I need to tell you something." Seated at the table, Samuel took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he clasped them together. "I've worked with Officer Croft for 2 years," he began, his tone heavy with guilt. "I've seen him bend the rules before, but last night was different." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "What happened, Officer Rios?" "I saw him plant the drugs," Samuel said, his voice cracking slightly. "I didn't say anything at the time because I was scared. Croft has a way of retaliating against people who speak out. But I can't stay silent anymore, not when an innocent man's life is at stake." The room fell silent, the weight of Samuel's confession hanging heavy in the air. Judge Thorne leaned back, his expression unreadable as he studied the young officer. "Do you understand the gravity of what you're saying?" Judge Thorne asked, his voice steady but firm. "Yes, sir," Samuel replied, meeting the judge's gaze. "And I'm willing to testify." Eleanor leaned forward, her voice softer now. "You're doing the right thing, Officer Rios. But this won't be easy. Are you prepared for what comes next?" Samuel nodded, though the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. "I am." While Samuel's confession was a breakthrough, Eleanor knew it wasn't enough to dismantle Officer Croft's fabricated case. They needed hard evidence, something indisputable. Hours later, she received a call from a local business owner whose security cameras had captured the traffic stop. The footage was grainy but clear enough to show Officer Croft approaching Ethan's car, his body camera conspicuously turned off. Moments later, the video revealed Officer Croft subtly slipping something under the driver's seat during his search. Eleanor's heart raced as she watched the footage. It was the smoking gun they needed. Meanwhile, Officer Croft sat in the break room, his confidence unraveling. He had overheard whispers about Eleanor's investigation and the surveillance footage. Panic clawed at him, but his pride wouldn't let him admit defeat. He doubled down, attempting to manipulate his colleagues into backing his version of events. "What's happening here is a witch hunt," Officer Croft snarled at a group of junior officers. "They're trying to take me down because I did my job." But his words rang hollow. The junior officers exchanged uneasy glances, their faith in Officer Croft waning. That evening, as the evidence mounted, Eleanor and Judge Thorne confronted Captain Wallace in his office. "Captain," Eleanor began, placing the surveillance footage on his desk. "This isn't just a case of bad judgment. This is criminal misconduct." Captain Wallace frowned, his face betraying his discomfort. Eleanor, these are serious accusations. Are you sure? Look at the footage, Judge Thorne interjected, his voice cutting through the room. And listen to your officer's testimony. If you let this slide, you're complicit. Captain Wallace hesitated before finally nodding. I'll authorize an internal investigation. Later that night, Judge Thorne visited Ethan in his holding cell. The sight of his father brought a flood of relief to Ethan's face. You're coming home tonight, Judge Thorne said, his voice firm but warm. Eleanor secured your release. The charges will be dropped by morning. Ethan exhaled deeply, the weight of the past day lifting slightly. Thank you, Dad, for believing in me. Judge Thorne's expression softened. I've always believed in you, son. But this isn't over. Officer Vincent Croft won't get away with this. As Ethan walked out of the precinct, his father at his side, he couldn't help but glance back at the place that had almost destroyed him. The nightmare wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Unbeknownst to them, Officer Croft watched from a shadowed corner, his arrogance replaced by cold fear. The truth was closing in, and there was nowhere left to hide. The courthouse was abuzz with hushed conversations as people gathered for the preliminary hearing. Word of Officer Vincent Croft's alleged misconduct had spread, drawing lawyers, law enforcement officials, and community members eager to witness the unfolding drama. At the center of it all was Ethan Hayes, seated beside Eleanor Vance, his attorney. Across the aisle sat Officer Vincent Croft, his once confident demeanor replaced by a steely unease. Judge Miriam Shaw, known for her no-nonsense approach, entered the courtroom and called the hearing to order. The gavel's sharp cracks silenced the room, setting the stage for what would become a pivotal moment in the fight for justice. Eleanor Vance rose from her seat, her presence commanding. She approached the bench, her voice clear and resolute. Your Honor, we are here today because the charges against my client, Ethan Hayes, are not only unfounded, they are the result of deliberate corruption. Officer Croft abused his authority, planted evidence, and fabricated a report to falsely incriminate an innocent man. This case is not just about Ethan Hayes. It's about holding those in power accountable for their actions. Eleanor's words were met with murmurs from the gallery, a ripple of approval that underscored the weight of her argument. Officer Croft's lawyer, Benjamin Cole, stood next, his expression polished but wary. Your Honor, the defense's claims are sensational at best. Officer Croft has a record of exemplary service. The drugs were discovered during a lawful search, and any suggestion otherwise is an attempt to deflect from the defendant's guilt. Judge Shaw nodded curtly. We'll let the evidence speak for itself. Proceed. Eleanor called her first witness, Officer Samuel Rios. Samuel took the stand, his uniform crisp but his face pale. He swore the oath, then took a deep breath as Eleanor approached. Officer Rios. Eleanor began, her tone steady. You were present during the traffic stop that led to Mr. Hayes' arrest. Can you describe what you observed? Samuel hesitated, the weight of his testimony pressing down on him. I saw Officer Croft search the vehicle, he said. But before the search, I saw him place something under the driver's seat. The courtroom erupted in gasps, and Judge Shaw banged her gavel for order. Continue, Eleanor urged. It was a small bag, Samuel said, his voice growing steadier. I didn't report it immediately because I was afraid of retaliation. But I can't stay silent knowing an innocent man was framed. Benjamin Cole leapt to his feet. Objection. Speculative and self-serving. Judge Shaw raised a hand. Overruled. The witness may continue. Eleanor then presented the surveillance footage from the nearby shop. The video, projected onto a screen, showed Officer Croft leaning into the car, his hand slipping under the driver's seat in a motion too deliberate to be innocent. The timestamp aligned perfectly with the moment Officer Croft claimed to have discovered the drugs. The evidence was damning, and Officer Croft's once stoic expression began to crack. His lawyer whispered urgently to him, but Officer Croft shook his head, his confidence unraveling. When it was Benjamin Cole's turn to cross-examine, he attempted to discredit Officer Samuel Rios. Officer Rios, isn't it true that you've had disagreements with Officer Croft in the past? That you might have a personal vendetta? Samuel met his gaze evenly. I've disagreed with him because I believe in doing the right thing. This isn't about a vendetta. It's about justice. Cole turned to the surveillance footage next, claiming it was inconclusive and could have been misinterpreted. But his arguments lacked conviction, and the weight of the evidence was undeniable. Near the end of the hearing, Judge Marcus Thorne requested to make a statement, not as Ethan's father, but as a veteran of the justice system. Judge Shaw, recognizing the significance of his perspective, allowed it. Judge Thorne stood, his presence commanding. Your Honor, I have served in the judiciary for over 3 decades, and I have seen cases like this erode public trust in our institutions. When those sworn to protect and serve betray that trust, the entire system suffers. Today, we have an opportunity to send a message. No one is above the law, not even those who enforce it. His words resonated, a powerful reminder of the stakes. Judge Shaw took a moment to deliberate before addressing the courtroom. Based on the evidence presented, including the testimony of Officer Rios and the surveillance footage, the charges against Mr. Ethan Hayes are dismissed. Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation into Officer Croft's conduct, with the recommendation of criminal charges for abuse of power and evidence tampering. The gavel fell, and the courtroom erupted into a mixture of relief and quiet applause. Officer Croft slumped in his seat, the reality of his actions crashing down on him. Outside the courthouse, Ethan embraced his father, the weight of the ordeal finally lifting. Eleanor joined them, her expression softened by a rare smile. You fought hard for me, Ethan said, his voice filled with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you. Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't need to thank me. Just live your life with purpose. That's the best way to honor this fight. As they walked away, Officer Croft was escorted out of the courthouse in handcuffs, his arrogance replaced by the stark reality of justice catching up with him. For Ethan, the battle was over, but his resolve to fight for others who faced similar injustices had only just begun. The days following the dismissal of charges against Ethan Hayes marked the beginning of a seismic shift in the fight for justice. The revelations in court didn't just expose Officer Vincent Croft's corruption. They ignited a broader conversation about accountability within law enforcement. Officer Croft's downfall was a symbol, but for Ethan, the scars of his experience were still fresh. Officer Vincent Croft's trial was swift and damning. The surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and Officer Samuel Rios's testimony formed an airtight case. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of Officer Croft's defense. His lawyer attempted to paint him as a dedicated officer under immense pressure, but the jury saw through the excuses. In the courtroom, Officer Croft sat slumped in his chair, the weight of his actions finally breaking him. When the guilty verdict was read on charges of evidence tampering, falsifying reports, and abuse of power, his shoulders sagged further. The sentence was harsh but fitting: 5 years in prison and a permanent ban from serving in any law enforcement capacity. As Officer Croft was escorted out of the courtroom, handcuffed and disgraced, the echoes of justice reverberated. For the first time, he was no longer the predator, he was the prey. The fallout from Officer Croft's case didn't stop with him. Captain Wallace, the precinct's commander, was placed under scrutiny for fostering an environment where officers like Officer Croft operated unchecked. An internal review revealed systemic failures, from lack of oversight to unreported complaints against Officer Croft. Captain Wallace was forced to resign, and a reform-focused interim captain was appointed. Training sessions on ethical policing and bias awareness were mandated for all officers, and new measures were introduced to ensure accountability, including stricter body cam protocols and an independent review board. For Officer Samuel Rios, the decision to testify against Officer Croft had been a double-edged sword. While many colleagues commended his courage, others ostracized him. Realizing he could no longer work in a precinct tainted by corruption, Samuel transferred to another department, determined to uphold the values that had guided him to speak out. His story became an example of the power of doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. For Ethan, life didn't immediately return to normal. The experience had left him shaken, his trust in the system deeply eroded. Even with his name cleared, the memories of cold handcuffs and Officer Croft's smug smirk lingered. The humiliation of being falsely accused, the fear of losing his freedom, and the betrayal of trust weighed heavily on him. Ethan found himself questioning his safety in everyday situations. Something as simple as driving home now felt fraught with danger. But Ethan refused to let fear define him. With encouragement from his father, Judge Marcus Thorne, and Eleanor Vance, he channeled his anger and frustration into advocacy. He joined a local reform group, sharing his story at community events and becoming a voice for those who lack the resources or connections to fight back against injustice. Through these efforts, Ethan discovered a newfound strength and purpose. Months later, Ethan took his advocacy to the next level by joining a national organization dedicated to criminal justice reform. His story became a rallying cry, inspiring others to speak out against abuses of power. One day, after a particularly moving talk at a youth center, a teenager approached him. "Hearing you talk about what happened," the boy said, his voice trembling, "it makes me feel like I'm not alone. Like maybe I can make a difference too." Ethan smiled, his chest swelling with purpose. "You can. We all can." Judge Marcus Thorne, reinvigorated by the ordeal, launched a campaign to push for reforms in the justice system. He used his influence to advocate for better oversight of law enforcement, stronger protections for whistleblowers like Samuel Rios, and community-led initiatives to rebuild trust. At a public forum, Judge Thorne addressed a packed audience. "This isn't just about one corrupt officer," he said, his voice steady but impassioned. "This is about creating a system where integrity is the standard, not the exception. Where justice isn't just a word, it's a reality for everyone." The crowd erupted in applause, a testament to the resonance of his message. At a conference for young activists, Ethan delivered a speech that encapsulated his journey. "I thought justice was something that just existed, a guarantee. But it's not. Justice is something we have to fight for, every day, together. What happened to me isn't unique, and that's why we can't stop. We have to keep pushing until justice isn't the exception, but the rule." The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time since his ordeal began, Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had turned his pain into purpose, his suffering into strength. One evening, Ethan and Judge Thorne sat on the porch of Judge Thorne's home, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was calm, and for a moment, the weight of the past felt distant. "Do you think things will really change, Dad?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet but hopeful. Judge Thorne looked at his son, pride evident in his gaze. "Change is slow, Ethan, but it starts with people like you. People willing to stand up, speak out, and refuse to back down." Ethan nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. He may not have asked for this fight, but it was one he was ready to face. Together, they sat in silence, the future stretching out before them like the endless sky, their shadows long but their purpose clear.